It's time for the Financial Crisis Talk Center with Ken Gross and David Einstandig from Thav Gross.
Credit card debt is number one. I view it as financial cancer.
40% of your gross income is going to just pay the debt service. You got no chance of getting out. I would give up my credit score to get rid of debt.
Here's your host, Ken Gross.
All right, welcome back to the Talk Center. We're going to talk, word of the day is questions, and the topic is going to be tax problems. We're going to ask the questions that we find that people are always asking us, and then we're going to give you the answers, and then we're going to try and give you the explanations behind the answers, because the answers are not always enough. And that kind of reminded me of one of my favorite movies, a scene from A Few Good Men. And in that scene, it's in the beginning of the movie, and Daniel Caffey, that's Tom Cruise, is in Gitmo, in Guantanamo Bay, and he's interviewing Colonel Jessup, Jack Nicholson. And he's asking him questions relative to the death of Private William Santiago. And, you know, Jack Nicholson is just an SOB in this movie, and he's tough as can be. So Caffey says, "So, Colonel such and such, if you could tell me whether you talked to William Santiago or you filed a report," and he asks him a question, and the Colonel goes, "Yes." And then he asks him a couple more questions, and the Colonel goes, "Yes." And then he says to him, "If you would like to elaborate at all, feel free and just elaborate if you would like to do so, okay?" "Yes." So we need to do a little bit better job than that on the Financial Crisis Talk Center. So when I ask the question, Jenny, because Jenny, you're our tax expert, and I ask you a question relative to tax problems, I think we need to go a little bit more than just yes or no. David, you're looking at me like I've lost
you can't handle the truth.
I've lost it forever.
An acceptable answer?
Yes, you can't handle the truth is always an acceptable answer with me.
I'm just trying to figure out where the last 32 seconds of my life have gone.
Yes.
Okay.
All right, question number one. Are we ready? We've got, for the tax segment, I think I only have like 5 questions. So we have to go through these. 5 major questions.
Okay.
I have not filed my tax returns. What should I do?
You should file them. It's very important that you file your returns. First, a lot of people assume that if they can't afford to
So
pay...
notice you didn't answer the question yes. You answered the question you should file them. This is a good start. Go ahead.
It was not really a yes or no option, or I might have. Just because you can't afford to pay the liability does not mean you shouldn't file the return. There are failure to file penalties and failure to pay penalties. So if you don't file with the idea that you're going to magically come up with the money in a few years, there's a few issues to that. First,
first of all, if you don't file, you have failure to file penalties and you have failure to pay penalties, correct?
Correct.
And both of those can go up to what, 25%?
About 25% each.
So if you file but you don't have the money to pay, you save yourself the 25% penalty, right?
That's correct.
Okay, so right there, that's a good reason. Give me another one.
Well, it's not a crime not to be able to afford to pay your taxes, but it is a crime not to file them.
All right, so if you don't want to be a criminal, you should probably file your tax returns. That's a good thing. Not that it's that likely that you're going to get charged, but it does happen.
Yeah, it does happen.
The other point
I've seen
is,
it happen.
Jenny, we've seen this time and time again that people typically don't not file for a year. They let it ride for several years. And what we find when Jenny sits down with them and we provide them with a guidance as to the information that we need to assist them in filing, that maybe 1 year or 2 years or more of the years, they don't even have a tax liability. And you can address then the failure to pay is taken care of. So if they just would have filed, they would have saved themselves a ton of money.
And then they're worrying about it. They're not sleeping at night. They know this anxiety is sitting there hanging over them. What about the problem of what we call, when we talk about it in the shop, so to speak, the SFR problem?
An SFR is an IRS term. It means substitute for return. If you don't file your return, eventually what the IRS will do is they'll take the information provided to them. Your employer has reported their W-2. If you're self-employed, the individuals that you work with or companies that you work with have recorded the 1099s that have been provided to you, along with all other types of income that you've received during the year. What the IRS does is they just take all of that information and they pick a filing status, usually either single or married filing separately. They don't give you any deductions. They throw it on a return and they file for you.
So the next worst problem there is if they file the return for you, it doesn't count as if you filed it, which when we talk about later, there are times, and Brian's talked about it and you've talked about it, income taxes can be dischargeable sometimes, and we'll talk about when later. But if it's an SFR, which I thought SFR stood for stupid for return. What's it called? Substitute
for return.
Oh, I had the wrong acronym there. Same effect, though.
Let me give
what
you.
What happens, though, is if the IRS or the state of Michigan file for you, they're never dischargeable in bankruptcy because you don't meet the voluntary compliance requirement.
David, what do you want to say?
I wanted to back up and just say an explanation. If you were to read all of the policy statements in the Internal Revenue Manual, you'll find that the IRS is clear on their policies, which basically state we do not impose penalties that you talked about to punish. We impose penalties because the goal of the IRS is to have taxpayers that voluntarily comply and voluntarily file their returns. And when we assess these penalties, it's to get a voluntary going forward a mentality with the taxpayer. So when you think about it, if you file, you're in sync with those policies.
Good points. And then I want to wrap up on this question with one other point, because people ask us, well, I don't have the information. Bottom line is we'll get the return filed. If you have to estimate, you estimate. Filing the return is more important when it comes down to it than accuracy. Not filing the return is the worst thing you could possibly do. Question number 2. Can you really settle my taxes for pennies on the dollar? I watch these commercials. People call us up saying, hey, I saw this guy, Taxmasters, the guy with the beard who's out of business now, and Ronnie Deutsch, the woman out of California who's out of business now. We can settle your taxes for pennies on the dollar. Can you do that, Jenny?
Maybe, sometimes, yes. It is a real program where the IRS offers, if you meet their criteria, to settle your debt for less than you owe them. But you have to go through the analysis.
All right, and we're coming up in our break, and I want to talk about this more. It's called the offer and compromise, and it does work sometimes, but other times it doesn't work. We're going to take a break. When we come back, we're going to look at the offer and compromise, when you can settle pennies on the dollars and when you can't, and then what do you do after that? We'll be back after the break.
I couldn't get out of the car. I couldn't run or exercise. I couldn't work.
Dr. Lewis Radin believes that pain shouldn't have to wait. His Spine Specialist of Michigan is a comprehensive center dedicated to helping you manage pain now. Expect the latest techniques and personalized care. Why suffer another minute?
He's the best. I tell people that he's the one that saved my life.
Make your appointment with Dr. Radin. Call 248-792-9496.
Are you struggling to pay your mortgage? Afraid of foreclosure and the financial mess it can cause? Time is not on your side. Call Alan Stalter, the short sale specialist. For years, Alan has been helping distressed homeowners navigate through the short sale process. His experience will get you out of your home without the credit score damage that follows foreclosure. If you want a fresh start, you need to call Alan Stalter, the short sale specialist, 248-854-3829 or MetroDetroitShortSale.com.
No one ever thinks that a serious injury can happen to them, but it can, and it does. And it can happen to you. And when it does, you need a fighter in that courtroom for you. Call me, Ben Johnson. Automobile accident, police misconduct, medical malpractice, product liability. You know what you're up against, how hard it is to get answers. When all you want is justice, call me, Ben Johnson. Whatever your legal crisis, I will fight for you. Call me today.
Do you have tax problems, unfiled returns?
Facing levies on wages in your property, you need an expert, not a cartoon character or salesman. Thav Gross is your solution.
You need to look at the big picture. That's what we do. We develop a plan that's right for you.
I had major tax problems. I didn't know what to do.
You need to address the problem now. Call the experts.
We're Thav Gross. Our firm will solve your problem.
888-235-HELP. That's 888-235-HELP.
Going from hourly to salary seemed like a good career move, but now you're working 60 hours a week instead of 40, and you aren't getting paid any of that extra time. You're stuck, right? Wrong. You can be on salary and still be entitled to overtime. If you've been wrongly denied such pay, you may be entitled to that and more. Gold Star Law is here to help you through your employment law problem, whatever it is.
Gold Star Law, protecting employees' rights. Call 1-800-WAGES-10 for a free consultation today.
Welcome back to the Talk Center. We're talking about questions is the word of the day, tax problems. Before we get into it, I want to give you a couple quick announcements. Number one is the Financial Crisis Analyzers are alive and working. It's on our websites at financialcrisistalkcenter.com. You can go to it. You pop in your data. It'll crunch the numbers, analyze the situation, and actually email you a detailed report giving you recommendations as to what might work and what might not work. It's not like the know-it-all, end-all analysis, but it really will narrow the scope of what is possible for you and what's not. Nice thing about it is it's free. So if you want to use it, go to financialcrisistalkcenter.com. Another thing is our new websites, our smartphone-compatible websites are now up and at 'em and operational. So if you're on your iPhone or your BlackBerry, your smartphone, I don't want to be an Apple
Is there
guy.
a BlackBerry anymore?
Yes, there is.
Of relevance?
I don't know. It's questionable. But you know, I don't want to depart. BlackBerry. I mean, I've been on the iPhone for a while. I gave up my BlackBerry, and I would not go back. But the nice thing about the BlackBerry was using the phone part. I still find that the iPhone is a great little computer, but every time I have to talk on the phone, it's like an inconvenience. That's why people are always using their thumbs texting. I think the iPhone's discouraging communication over the phone. That's my own little tidbit on that, but I don't want to get onto it. Go to our website, become a Financial Crisis Talk Center member. If you do that, you get weekly updates on events that are going on, newsletters, so on and so forth. Try and keep you posted as things are going on, notices of seminars, things like that. Also, friend us on Facebook, Financial, Legal, and Crisis Talk Center, or just go to Ken Gross and friend me. I put all the financial crisis stuff onto my site as well. We have a seminar coming up. Our last seminar was... we wrapped up. We had a great response to the last one. We've scheduled the next one for February 25th. It's titled How to Eliminate Your Debt and Build Wealth. It's from 7 to 8:30 at our offices in Bingham Farms. New topics include importance of budgeting and addressing student loan problems. If you want to sign up, go on your smartphone and do it right there. Just go to the websites, thavgross.com or financialcrisistalkcenter.com. Click on seminar. There's a little form you fill in, and then we mail you the tickets. And you can also do things the old-fashioned way, which would be to call us, and you can register that way, 888-235-HELP. We also have, and Eric will talk about it shortly, but we have an estate planning seminar coming up, strictly on estate planning, hosted by our own Eric Glick, who's with us. And that's going to be on Tuesday, March 4th. At our offices in Bingham Farms from 7 to 8:30 as well. To sign up for that, you have to do it the old-fashioned way because it's estate planning. You got to call 888-235-HELP. We don't have the sign-up yet on the website, and we're working on getting that accomplished. All right, let's go back to tax problems now. We were talking about question number 2 on offering compromise, settling for pennies on the dollar. Basically, Jenny, when does it work? Who's the right person for an offer and compromise?
It's basically like preparing a tax return, Ken. So the first thing that you need to do is really go through an income and allowable expense analysis. So when you're sitting and meeting with someone regarding this, you need to know that they have to have every single piece of information that you would either give your accountant or have in front of you when you're doing your year-end individual income tax returns, plus a detailed list of all of your assets, including fair market value of your vehicles, all sorts of things.
I'm following on what you need, but I want to kind of bring out a couple issues with regard to that to eliminate. First of all, the old rule compared to the new rule. There actually is a new rule on offer and compromise that came in effect May 21 of 2012, and it's actually made it 4 times better than under the old rule to utilize an offer and compromise. Under the old rule, you looked at 4 years of income less allowed expenses. Under the new rule, you can look to as little as 1 year of income, less allowed expenses, which you've told me they've made the allowed expenses easier than they used to be.
That's correct, Ken. I think you're getting the easiest way to put this is they determine what they would require you pay them on a monthly basis on an installment agreement by looking at your current income, current allowable expenses. If they think you can pay them $100 a month, they multiply that by 12 months and you can pay them $1,200 plus any value in any liquid assets such as your 401k, IRAs, stocks, bonds.
Slow down. So what you have is you have to. If you want to pay based on 1 year's income, you have to make that payment within 5 months. But if you don't have the money, you could then actually pay 2 years' income and you'd have 6 to 24 months. That's kind of crazy in my mind. If you're going to do an offer and compromise, you want to take advantage of the 1 year rule. So here's the situation you have to realize. If you've got $100,000 in your IRA or your 401k, this is not going to be a good thing because that money has to, and you owe $110,000, the $100,000 they're going to collect you from.
As long as you have access to it. There are some types of employees that have to retire before they're allowed to touch that money, and if that's the case,
like a defined benefit
count.
plan or certain limitations on a retirement plan. But if you've
correct.
got an IRA or a normal 401k, it doesn't work. So the bottom line here on this issue is the offer and compromise can be right for you, and it can be a great thing, but you have to qualify. If it's really designed for the person who doesn't have any retirement assets and doesn't have any assets, he has some income, he's got expenses or she's got expenses, then it's right. If someone just tells you, when you call up an 800 number and you talk to some person that you've never seen in California, they say, "Oh, we can settle your debt for pennies on the dollar. Give us your credit card number, we'll charge you $5,000." You're going to get ripped off. You need to do the analysis first. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. Now, let's suppose the offer and compromise won't work for me. Is there any other way I can get out from paying the tax? How else can I don't want to pay, Jenny. I don't want to pay the government any more taxes. What can you do?
Well, the first thing we would look at in that case is whether or not you qualify to discharge them in bankruptcy. If you would qualify for a Chapter 7, because there's certain assets that are protected in bankruptcy that are not protected when you file an offer and compromise, such as your 401k or your IRA.
So bankruptcy is another option when it comes to getting out from under taxes that most people don't know. Income taxes only, not payroll taxes. And there's a rule. There's a 3-prong rule that Brian always gives us, and Brian's out suntanning in Florida, although it might only be 20 degrees right now. We're going to come back. We're going to break. We're going to give you the 3-point rule, and then we'll move off of taxes. We'll move off of offer and compromise to the next issue. We'll be back after the break.
You like your job. What you don't like is the way your boss has been treating you. He's making comments about how you look instead of your work, and he's been touching you inappropriately. If you complain, is he allowed to fire you? Absolutely not. Unwelcome sexual comments, advances in contact are illegal in the workplace. Make him pay. Gold Star Law is here to help you through your employment law problem, whatever it is.
Gold Star Law, protecting employees' rights. Call 1-800-WAGES-10 for a free consultation today.
If you're retired and in a financial crisis, there is a way out.
It pains me when I see a retired couple exhaust their savings by paying credit card bills and for a home hopelessly underwater.
Thav Gross specializes in helping retired people in financial crisis.
You just can't keep paying until you're broke. You need to address the problem now.
888-235-HELP. That's 888-235-HELP.
We're Thav Gross. Our firm will solve your problem.
Every family has the family meeting, and we all know what that means. Dad's got dementia. What are we going to do? What's the care plan that the family has in place? Usually they don't, or they struggle with a care plan. When you go home tonight and you talk to your tax person and you talk to your financial person, say, what's the plan that you have in place? And as soon as they don't give you an answer, give me a call, because I can do it for you.
Double Action, shooting center and gun shop for the largest selection of guns, accessories, and ammunition. Double Action is your only pro gun shop. And now you can train with the best in our basic CCW course with the most comprehensive curriculum, the best resources, and most accomplished staff. Don't be fooled by cheap imitations. Double Action is the only place to get your CCW or renewal. Double Action. We're on DeQuinder and Madison Heights.
Do you have tax problems, unfiled returns? Facing levies on wages in your property? You need an expert, not a cartoon character or salesman. Thav Gross is your solution.
You need to look at the big picture. That's what we do. We develop a plan that's right for you.
I had major tax problems. I didn't know what to do.
You need to address the problem now. Call the experts.
We're Thav Gross. Our firm will solve your problem.
888-235-HELP. That's 888-235-HELP.
All right, welcome back. I want to thank our sponsors before we get back to the offer to the how you can discharge income taxes in bankruptcy. Ben Johnson Law, Gold Star Law, Samasco Law, Double Action Shooting Range and Gun Shop, Spine Specialist in Michigan, REO Elite Services, Alan Stalter, Short Sales Specialist, and coming on board, Cardiology Associates of Michigan. Back to discharging taxes. So let me paint the scene. You don't qualify for an offer in compromise. You have tax liabilities for income taxes. It's possible that you can discharge them in bankruptcy. You still have to otherwise qualify for the bankruptcy, and it has to be the smart move. But the rule is this. The return must actually be a filed return. Remember we talked about earlier in the segment these SFRs, substituted form return. If they filed the return for you, this doesn't apply. So that's another reason why you need to file. It must be 3 years since the tax return was due. It must be 2 years since you filed it. And it must be at least 240 days since your taxes were assessed. Now, I'll give you an example. So the rule, when you say it, doesn't mean that much. Let's assume we're talking about 2010 taxes. 2010 taxes were due April 15th, 2011. So it has to be at least April 16th, 2014 to meet the first test. So if you've got 2010 taxes and you filed them on April 15th, then you have they were due on April 15th, you're in play come this April. The next rule, it had to be at least 2 years ago. So assume you filed your 2010 return with an extension and you filed it on October 15th, 2011. Then you'd need to wait till at least October 15th, 2013. That's not an issue because we're already waiting to April 16th, 2004 on the first rule. On the third rule, the 240-day rule, when the return is filed, you then get a bill. That's the assessment. When that assessment comes, you have to at least have 240 days before you file the bankruptcy. So if you filed the return on October 15th, you'd probably be assessed sometimes in November of 2012. You have to then, or 2012, you wait 240 days. That's not going to be an issue either. And there are exceptions for fraud and things like that that prohibit you from discharging the taxes in bankruptcy. But for the most part, this is a very viable rule that when you call up one of these tax relief agencies, they're not even going to mention them to you.
Well, Ken, it actually gets worse than that because the one thing you didn't mention here is you've given the 3 basic rules, but there's also things that what they call toll that statute, meaning you can't even start counting that 3-year rule. And a lot of these fly-by-night companies, they don't think about that when doing the analysis. Sometimes they'll say to you, let's just throw it out there and see if it sticks. So when we look at something, I'm going to say...
throw what out there? Like an offer in compromise? Even though they know it won't fly.
Or a CDP. When we look at it,
What's a CDP?
it's a collection due process hearing. It's another thing. It's a tool that we use in working with the IRS, but you have to use these in the right manner.
Let me see if I got this right. SFR, that's for substitute return. OIC, offer and compromise. CDP, collection due process. How many other three-letter acronyms
You
did
forgot
you pop
one.
in?
OMG.
Oh, my God.
You want to know when that applies?
Yes.
That applies when the client comes in and we realize that they had filed a bankruptcy, and if they would have waited 24 hours before filing and filed 1 day later, they would have discharged $50,000 of tax liability.
You're absolutely right.
That's an OMG, and we've seen it, and I'm sure we'll see it in the future.
All right, now we had two more questions that I wanted to cover in this segment, and we're going to have to cover them quickly. Question number 4 is, what if I owe the taxes? I can't file an offer and compromise. I can't file a bankruptcy. Can I get time to pay? And what if my wages have been levied? Can you get me on an installment? Can you get me time to pay?
Yes.
And can you get wages? Can you get a wage levy release?
Yes, so we can get a wage levy release. In order to get a wage levy release, you have to have all your returns filed, and we have to work out some type of collection alternative.
All right, now on installment payments, I know if you owe less than $50,000, you can virtually automatically get a 72-month payment agreement. Although you and I have been working on this, the law says that, the regulations say that, their website says that, but when you call up the IRS collection agency, the agents, they seem to have a real difficult time knowing what to do. Is that true?
That's true, which is why I then send those to the taxpayer advocate, and they scratch their heads and say, why can't IRS
But then you get
figure it
them
out?
done.
Yes, of course.
Yeah. So the point there is, you should. This isn't one of the questions, but you shouldn't try and do these things on your own. First of all, when an IRS, when they're talking to you, asking you questions, you have to give them the information. You have to answer their questions. If they're talking to us, we only have to give them the information that we choose to give them, because we can always say we don't know. We'll get back to you. Because sometimes you have to be careful on what you tell them. I could go on. If you can't afford to make the payment, or you owe more than $50,000, then what happens in 30 seconds or less?
We set up an installment agreement based on your current income and the allowable expenses, and there's different discretionary provisions that we may be able to extend the time out or get some additional expenses.
And I have another three-letter word for you, CNC. What does that mean, Jenny Lane?
CNC is currently not collectible, which means your current income and is less than your allowable expenses.
So I think we have 4 acronyms. We had SFR, OIC, CDP, CNC, and OMG. That's pretty good in one day. And next week, you're going to be tested on this if you're listening. What should all this cost? That's the next one. All right, I listened to you. They want $7,500 when I call 1-800 blah, 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 blah out of California. Is that what this stuff costs? Is it that expensive?
No, it's not. And one of the things that I always tell people is don't give them a dime. Call me, because I've had a lot of people pay $7,500 to that 1-800 number. Sit down with me, and in 5 minutes I'll say, oh, you don't qualify for that because of X, Y, and Z.
It really gets us mad when we see people hosed. Tax problems are serious problems. They need to be addressed, but they're not insurmountable, and you shouldn't get hosed. And I'm just telling you straight out, if you should not put your future in the hands of somebody you can't sit across the table and talk to, who you don't know who you're dealing with. Thanks for listening to this segment of the Financial Crisis Talk Center. We will be back with another segment.